Hello, my name is Laurie Smith, and I am a child abuse prevention public speaker. That's what I've been doing since 2009. I'm a child abuse survivor, and I'm just doing 30 days here on YouTube, broadcasting live. 30 days just talking about child abuse. So it's not a fun topic. It's not. It's definitely distressing, and so you have to know what's good for you to listen to, and if you think the topics of abuse might bother you, any type of abuse, you need to just go watch something else or whatever. It wouldn't be hurting my feelings at all. And the topics of child abuse. I mean, the headlines roll in. We all see what's going on. Only certain people really feel the desire or led to get involved with child abuse prevention or child protection. So I'm just one of those people. I think that, I'd like to think that I would have done this anyway, even if I hadn't been abused as a child. So, um, but I think because I was abused and I grew up abused, watching my family, be destroyed by abuse and dysfunction, that, definitely that's probably, a huge part of why I'm doing what I'm doing. So, I care about children. And so, I'm just another voice out here adding my voice to everybody else's, just to make some noise so that this stuff just doesn't get shoved back under the carpet. And because child rights have only been around for a short time, um, where there's a governing body of rights where governments say, yes, these are the rights of the child, it's just only been, a few years. We're just barely making progress here. Um, Back in the 70s when I was growing up, 60s, 70s, um, there really wasn't any kind of, you know, help for people who were abused. And the courts really didn't really do much about child abuse. I mean, if somebody got hauled into court for, caught being found guilty of child abuse, it was kind of like a slap on the wrist. And they might remove the children if they thought there was the possibility that the child would be killed. But if they didn't think there was any threat to their lives, that they were just being abused, they just left them in the home to be abused. And that's exactly what happened to me and my family and my siblings. So it's really distressing. And so I fight against child abuse and I stand up and speak out against child abuse. And it's just what I do. So, welcome to the show. We're doing 30 days. So, this is day 12. We're talking about institutional child abuse. This is a subject that's just so distressing, mainly because in recent news with Every Child Matters, with the residential schools up here in Canada, um, we were looking sort of into this stuff last 2020. And so um, it was all over the news. How many, they were finding mass graves of these Métis children mainly, and some other Native American, children who had been killed at the hands of these, priests and nuns and different, church authorities who were supposed to be looking after them and ended up killing them. And this has been going on for years. But that's only one example. So we're gonna cover like what is institutional child abuse. We're looking at several websites. I did put the links into the show page, so you can grab those. And it's just brief snippets. We're not going to read the whole web pages or anything. I just want to sort of bring attention to this um, because it is a huge issue. The last residential school closed in what, 1996 or something like that. It's only been a few years. You know what I mean? So we're talking. This is all fresh, in the hearts and minds of those who have had loved ones who died in institutional care, some type of institutional care, or who were abused, and suffered greatly at the hands of someone who was supposed to be looking after them. And so, we have to look at this stuff. We have to, like society as a whole, the world as a whole, if we're going to make any change or difference for the children of tomorrow, then we, of course, then need to look at this stuff. And I mean, the average person on the street, do they need to know about this stuff? I think it's important that people actually know that it's going on, to realize that it may be me in my own personal life don't know anybody who was abused at a residential school. Doesn't mean it's not happening, or that it didn't happen. um, and that children who are in government care all over the world in their different governments are being abused right now as we speak. And it's just important to realize this is going on. I think we need to support lawmakers who will fight for child rights. stand up for the rights of the child and who will, work with lawmakers, for tougher, stiffer penalties and sentences, for people who are caught abusing children. Because it's right now as it stands, people just, they know if they get caught, they're really not, nothing really going to happen to them. They're just going to get a little slap on the wrist. Oh, you shouldn't be doing that. And so they just keep doing it. So it's really kind of pathetic. That just tells you what the world thinks of children. They're really not thought of very highly, obviously. And they actually never have been. If you look back at the history, through history, at how the world has seen children, um, it's really pathetic because children are the future of tomorrow, right? We're all going to die, but these little children are going to, you know what I mean? So it's like children are the future, and we really need to put more, stock in taking better care of them, right? Because the world would be a lot different place if we did. Um, it's not okay to do these things to children. Children have rights, and I mean these rights were fought for, and people worked and spent their whole lives trying to get these child rights in place, and that's wonderful. And I'm thankful for these people who have dedicated their lives to this, and these rights, if we don't uphold them, they don't really matter. You know what I mean? A lot of countries have these rights, but they don't uphold them. So they're there, but they don't. The children just don't um, benefit from them, right? They're still doing horrible things to children all around the world, and it's like, when is this going to stop? So one of the websites is called AmericanSPCC.org, and it just has a little snippet in there, protecting children from institutionalized abuse. And they say here the dynamics. I'm not reading the whole page. You can go check that out. I've got the link there. The dynamics of institutional abuse. Institutionalized child abuse is incredibly complex, as psychological trauma is often tied with the actual physical or sexual abuse. And victims are manipulated into believing their perpetrators care for them, when in actuality, these perpetrators are committing illegal sexual acts. And the process of persuading victims to engage in sexual contact is known as grooming. So there's all this going on. You know, institutional abusers are typically people in positions of power and authority. They can work in schools, participate in sports, serve as religious figures, play active roles in community organizations. One of the major issues of child abuse in these institutional environments is that children are expected to respect authority figures. So predators use this to their advantage, believing that their victims will do what is asked of them without question. And, this is what happens. And they take advantage of these children. And I mean, this is churches, this is, this is government, um, you know, sort of, like foster care, child homes, orphanages, things like this, not just in North America, but around the world. And really, it's going on everywhere. It's not just around the world that they're abusing children, but it's not happening here in North America. It most definitely is happening here in North America. And, churches is a big one. All the different churches, it doesn't matter which one. Even though there's, always in the news, the Catholic Church, because they've been just so busted, abusing children, killing children, right? And, just annihilating children. They just love to do that for some reason. But the other churches are just as guilty. They just haven't had so many cases, I don't think, or so many cases haven't been brought forward. So there are some, in the news here and there, but the Catholic Church really is responsible for so many children's deaths, since 323 when or whatever that year was when Constantine made everybody be Catholic. So it's like, I mean, it's been going way back. And I mean, people groups, countries, nations, you name it, have always killed children, taken advantage of children, and sexually used children. And today we're standing up and saying, no, it's not right. Now that we have rights and we're not part of that serf system anymore. We actually have rights, and we can say no. We don't want. We don't. We're going to stand up for these children. We're going to fight for their rights. So important. It is absolutely so important. you know, this is not okay, right? So it's these people who have power over these children, even in situations like juvenile, you know, juvenile, like juvenile homes, like for juvenile delinquents and stuff like that, institutionalized. So it's anywhere where a child is, not in a home situation, but in an institution of some type. Even Boy Scouts. I mean, we're talking like they were saying after school stuff, extracurricular sports things, like that. This can be going on in all of that stuff, right? Brownies. I mean, girls clubs, boys clubs, you name it. Anywhere where there's somebody in charge of children. Well, we got to think about it. This is something that a lot of people just don't think about. Where does child abuse happen? Where the children are. So, hey, it's wherever the children are. That's who's abusing the children. So it's like, yeah, people don't think this stuff doesn't happen. You betcha it does. And I mean, doctors have been caught busting sexually abusing children. Dentists have been caught sexually abusing children. Just wherever a child is if there's a sexual predator around, and there's a bunch of them. They're all over the place. It's really horrific, right? So within institutions, I just think this is really disgraceful because these people are, for instance, we'll talk more about this with the residential school stuff, but these people are responsible for these children's well-being, welfare, for their well-being. And I mean, it's pathetic what goes on. And, you know, these children are the most vulnerable children because there's nobody there to watch and protect them. And even if some of the other children know what's going on, obviously they would. They can't say anything or they'll be killed, most likely. Um, so nobody says anything. And it's just allowed to continue on. That's why it's so important. There has to be watchdog stuff going on in institutions to watch out, that, especially the work with children. I mean, they do abuse adults too in institutions, sadly enough, especially jail systems, prison systems. But the thing is like, we're talking about children who are so vulnerable. And it's not their fault that they're in these institutions. It's like, especially residential schools where they were ripped away from their families and forced to go, Native Americans, little children, taken from their homes and made to go and learn, English or French or whatever, and by these church officials and government, and the Canadian government. I think there was some down in the States too as well, but I think it's gone on all around the world. This is something that they did back in those days, and it's just recently ended. But the thing is there's always mass graves associated with these residential schools, and it's not just sickness that took those kids out. They just threw them in a mass grave. They just killed so many that they just throw them in a mass grave, and they told the parents that the children had run away. So we're going to talk about that when we look at that article. This stuff is it's absolutely so, um, children who were abused often feel shame, because they were abused and stuff. And like, the shame isn't on us, it's on the abusers. You know what I'm saying? Shame on these people who are supposed to be looking out for these children and end up killing them, or abusing them, which to me is pretty much the same thing as killing them, right? This walking dead person. And so we have to as a society change the way we think about children, how we feel about children. I wish people would wake up and smell the coffee. How many generations are going to go by before there's real change made? Will there ever be real change made? Will anybody actually really give a blankety blank about children? I don't know. It's pretty discouraging. And, there's a whole bunch of people on the planet that do care, and we're the ones sitting around when we could be doing something else, shouting out about child abuse. It's such an uncomfortable topic. Nobody wants to hear about it. It's not fun. I could be doing something else, playing guitar, talking to friends, whatever. But I was abused as a child. I know what it's like, and my heart breaks for these little children they're gonna die tonight because of the abuse. So that's why we keep doing this, and it's discouraging because it doesn't look like there's much change. But as long as we keep talking about this, and keep sharing this information with people, and get involved in your local communities, make sure your own children are not being abused. make sure that their little play friends are not being abused in your neighborhood, children around them. Um, that's where it has to start, you know, has to start somewhere. So protect your own children, right? And it says because it can take decades for survivors to come forward and discuss their childhood trauma, it can be extremely difficult to seek justice against perpetrators in institutions where the abuse occurred. Major institutions like universities and churches have power and money to push abuse cases aside and suppress victims' voices. In doing so, these institutions are also protecting predators and inadvertently giving these predators more opportunity to harm children. And they said statistics show that institutional abusers, on average, may abuse at least 150 victims per each abuser. They've abused 150 children. I mean, that's what they say as far as the child sexual predators on the street. Their normal amount is about 100 children because these people have so much, um, you know, access to the children without anybody watching. It's just worse. So they said in recent years, however, we've seen legislation shift in favor of child abuse victims. And different states, including New York, have extended the statute of limitations for survivors to file claims against their abusers. In lawsuits against the Catholic Church, thousands of survivors are receiving compensation for the horrible crimes committed against them. However, this may only seem like a shred of justice for the trauma many abuse survivors had to endure as children. And that's just it. I mean, this is actually, I mean, it is. It's just unforgivable. Under the name of the church to do these things, you can kind of think outside the church. Maybe somebody, you might think somebody's just immoral and they just don't, they're just not thinking correctly and they abuse children. Within the church, those people should know better, and they take advantage of these little children, and then they just move them around so that you know nobody knows. They move them, 1,000 miles away. Nobody knows who they are. They get to abuse more children, you know. And this is something's got to be done. You know what I mean? Like seriously, but people just don't care about children. It's just the last thing on the totem pole. They care about money. That's their god, money. They just care about money. It's just it's pathetic that that's all this world cares about. It's oil, gas, and money, and power tripping. It's just like it's really frustrating. Um, but there's coming a judgment day. Yay. And I can't wait. So, what can we do moving forward? They said institutional abuse is as much a human issue as it is a systemic issue. It's important to stop victim blaming and invalidating survivor stories. And instead, we should be encouraging survivors to come forward without feeling ashamed of their experiences. And in the same vein, we need to hold the institutions accountable for enabling predators for harming children and bystanders for not doing their due diligence to get victims the help they deserve. That's exactly right. And making an effort to educate yourself and raise awareness in your community can help highlight the important issues of those who are silenced. And let's stand together with survivors of institutionalized child abuse with this Child Abuse Prevention Month and all year round. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's such an awesome article. And that's, again, americanspcc.org. That link is in the actual page. And there's tons of information here on this website. So, if you want to go take a look at it, I recommend it. It's really a great website. Next up is IndCan. This is the National Foundation to End Child Abuse and Neglect, and IndCan, and that's the next article we're looking at, preventing institutional child abuse. But I mean, this is just absolutely pathetic to hear the stories of these people who either, within the Catholic Church were sexually abused by a sexual predator or, endured physical abuse by the nuns or whatever. I've heard so many stories. I mean, I know a lot of survivors actually of this type of abuse from the Catholic Church. And, um, it's just heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. It's like their spirits were crushed, their souls were murdered, and um, their lives were taken from them, even though they're still alive. You know, and that's just really sad. And they were in a position of trust with these people at these, in these institutions where, you know, a level of trust you're supposed to have there, because they're working with children and they're living at the actual, compound, I want to say. It's more like a compound, if you ask me. Instead of a monastery or something, it's a compound, and there's that level of trust, and then that trust is broken, and then you just find out these people are evil, pure evil. You imagine how scary that is for a child, knowing that they could kill you, they could just dump your body in the mass graves with the other ones. So no, it's not okay. I don't mind saying it. So I've always I just love to shout out against this stuff because nobody wants to talk about these disgusting things because it's so hurtful. But you can imagine being a child going through these disgusting things and having your whole spirit and soul and your whole being ripped from you in a matter of seconds. Whether it be physical abuse, verbal, psychological, sexual abuse, doesn't matter. I mean, it's all horrible. And it's just not okay. And as a survivor, I mean, I'm just willing to speak out against this stuff. It's just ridiculous that the world just says, oh, well, can't you just get over it? You know what I mean? It's like, well, no, obviously we can't, because if we could, we would have a long fucking time ago. Excuse my language. So, it's just a real piss off. I get so angry because the world just doesn't care, just keeps on going and abusing children. You know, when are we going to all stand up and get angry about this? Everybody should be out, should be shouting out against child abuse right now. The whole world should be making so much noise that you can't hear over it. You know what I mean? That's just how I feel about it. So this INDCAN, this is good. Preventing institutional child abuse. What is institutional child abuse? Some of them go into a little bit more detail, sort of a different take on it, right? So it's kind of interesting to see what they have to say. He said, from a young age, children are taught to respect adults and authority figures, especially those who are responsible for a child's health and safety. And what happens when these trusted adults use their power to take advantage of children, risk their safety, traumatize them for years to come? When children are abused by older kids or adults outside of the household, it's considered institutional abuse. And this form of abuse can take place in schools, churches, other facilities where adults are in charge of children. They say that the complexities of institutional abuse can encompass any form of child maltreatment, though abusers in institutional environments have historically used their status to coerce victims into sexual abuse and exploitation. And I mean, it's just so sad, right? Uh, it's just not okay. Signs of abuse and traits of abusers. For parents, family members, caregivers, coaches, faith leaders, educators, it's important to be able to identify the potential signs of child sexual abuse. I think of abuse of any type, right? These may include depression, withdrawal, nervousness around specific people, locations, self-harming behaviors, secretiveness, refusal to go to school or church, complaints about their body, like their if they're being sexually abused, right? Inappropriate knowledge of sexual behaviors or topics. Child predators are masters of manipulation and may be those who you would least expect or even trust. Knowing the statistics of child abusers and their personality traits is vital in identifying those who may be taking advantage of children. For example, sexual abusers in institutional environments are typically upstanding members of the community. They can be friendly, charming, and relatable. Predators may also use their charm in order to garner trust with victims and their families. And this could mean the predator goes out of their way to infiltrate the family unit or isolate the child from their safety net in an effort to spend time alone with them, right? So they said here, at the end of the day, abusers will do anything in their power to get what they want, while also ensuring abuse goes unnoticed. And they've got info on how to, what we can all do to stop and prevent child abuse. And first of all, it's just being aware of who your children are around and doing some background safety check, background checks on them, criminal background checks. If you're wherever your children are, that's where the abuse is taking place. So, teacher, coach, pastor, youth pastor, it's just anybody, right? A group leader, like one of those um, scout type things, for girls or boys. Anybody can be an abuser, and they don't, like I said, they don't walk around looking like wearing a trench coat, looking like they're up to something shady. These people are in the community, and they've got friends, and they've got support, and they look great, you know. That's why people trust them and they allow them to take their children on camping trips or wherever, and or some sort of after school program, and then there's nobody else around, so that predator's got full access to your child. Could be a neighbor, a friendly neighbor. That happens a lot. Try to get in with your family and sexually abuse your children or whatever. It's just not okay, but it's going on, right? And it's disturbing. That's what I said. These shows, like this type of information, it's always very disturbing, right? And we have to talk about it, and we have to be, you know, really, if you have children, you need to know who's around your child at all times. Daycare, I mean, daycares especially, they're so always busted abusing children in all sorts of ways. That's just not the place to have your child, is at the local daycare. Not unless you do some serious background checks and maybe even have your child having a camera on them, a secret camera or something. Honest to God, you have to, because that's where these predators hang out. They get jobs in places where they can get access to children. They're janitors at schools, they're coaches at schools, teachers. Lots of teachers are sexual predators. You bet. And not just men either, women too. And women have been so busted for so many years doing this. All kinds of women, female sexual predators out there in schools. So you have to watch this, right? It's not just men, right? It just, it's heartbreaking, right? I can't believe there's just this much garbage going on. And, everybody just sits back, oh, well, until their child gets, is abused or, killed. And then you're crying the blues, well, and it's like, well, you got to watch where your children are. You better know who they're around, right? This is from CRIN, and that's the Child Rights International Network. This is a really interesting website. I have all sorts of emails coming into my inbox from CRIN because I signed up, to receive new updates from them. And for years ago, like many years ago, because I love their work and I think what they're doing is wonderful. I love anything to do with child rights. I'm like right on. Um, so this is CRIN, CRIN.org. This is children in institutions. What's the issue? The systematic abuse and neglect of children in care institutions is well established, yet the violence continues and few survivors ever secure redress. Children in residential community care may endure sexual abuse or be subjected to physical and emotional violence. The harm inflicted on them can last a lifetime, and people responsible for protecting them often hide the abuse. And children who have lived in the institutions are more likely to be drawn into the criminal justice system, perpetuating the cycle of violence and detention. So, access to justice for children in institutions. The occurrence of abuse and neglect of children in care institutions has been known to governments for decades, yet few survivors ever secure redress, which means they don't. There's never any restitution. You know what I mean? Nowadays they're working on it, right? But it's better than it was, but still, I mean, how many survivors were just told, you know, nothing we can do. It's too late. You're making this up, whatever. The institutional abuse of children takes many forms, including sexual abuse of children in residential care and community-based settings, physical or emotional abuse, and harm suffering from living in the dehumanizing institutional environment or of residential care. And like I said, this could be foster care. This could be, you know, children's homes, orphanages, like anywhere where somebody has access to children, and they're like they're the gods in there, you know. And those children have to do what they say, or they'll be killed and put into a mass grave. Isn't that so nice? It just makes me sick to my stomach. I just get angry when I see this stuff. The right to access justice for children in care institutions has long been neglected and ignored, with it being far more challenging for children to access justice when their rights are violated as a result of their placement in an institution, when their guardian, the state, is the perpetrator of the crime. Yep, bad news, man. All I know is there's a nice roasty, toasty place in hell for those people that have done this. Children's voices often remain unheard. They do not know who to trust, have no means of accessing help from the outside world, and many have disabilities, making communication even more challenging. So you can imagine that this is actually going on in homes, in care homes, where children are, you know, who have some type of physical disability. Um, they have no way to protect themselves. no way whatsoever. And if they can't speak because it has something to do with their speech, this goes on. There's just nobody to protect these children, and um, we as a world need to straighten up, and we really do, and we need to fix our priorities. I mean, I'm talking all of us. I'm not just saying you. I'm just saying everybody. Um, we, including myself, in on this. Like we need to get our priorities straight on what's important to us on this planet. Is it really all about money, things, fast cars, jobs, the best clothes, some sort of stupid diet? Is it really all about that? Because if it is, we're lost, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, we all, like all of us in the world, are responsible for this. Because even if we don't choose to not speak out against it, we're still part of it. Because we're not doing anything to stop it. So shame on, shame on us. You know what I mean? It's like it's really pathetic. I wish I had more time and money because if I did, I'd be involved in lawmaking or something. I would definitely be in government or um, child rights, not for profit or something. I'd be doing something. As it is right now, I just all I can do is use my voice and write books and whatever, try to write whatever I can and try to get it out there to add my voice with everybody else's, right? And I'm really thankful for the people that have supported my work over the years. I've had so many people listen to my stuff, you know, send me very, very kind, encouraging words that really made me feel really good because, I mean, it just was like a shot, like a shot in the arm, like a pat on the back, like, keep going, And I think that's awesome. Like that really made me feel really good. Just to know that so many people actually really do care about children. There are a lot of people that do care about children. We're all sitting around, what can we do, right? And that's why it kind of starts at home. If you have children, protect your own children and, protect the children around you in your community. Get involved locally, especially if you have time. Not everybody's got time to volunteer their time, but if you do, there's all kinds of stuff you can volunteer with to make a difference. If you can write or you do art or you do poetry, that always helps getting people to see in some visual way what child abuse does, what it is, because it's shocking and people remember that. Just reaching people no matter how you can, to make a difference in this, right, for children, because I mean, this is really heartbreaking. So, yeah, that's it. Well, there's not much more to this article, but they have a lot of resources on this website, this CRIN, and that's the Child Rights International Network. So you can go and check that out. They have all sorts of great info there for people. It's really worth looking at. And we're going to finish up tonight. We're looking at Gabriel Dumont Institute of Native Studies and Applied Research. And this article is by Desiree Barker, October 12th, 2021. And this is from gdins.org/GDI every child matters display. And this is to do with the Every Child Matters movement um, that Happily was talking about. And it's in May 2021, a harrowing discovery of the remains. I'm just reading what she's written. In May 2021, a harrowing discovery of the remains of 215 Indigenous children were found buried at the former Kamloops Residential School. And this tragedy sent shockwaves across the entire country and prompted many First Nations to begin radar ground searches for remains on former residential school grounds. And today, thousands of unmarked graves of children have been uncovered at the sites of the various residential schools across Canada. Now, that was a huge, huge issue up here. And people, my heart was broken. I'm not Native American. I think I'm like 1/18th like Native American back east. Somebody in my family was a Native American, but I mean we're talking way back. Probably maybe I'm like 1/24th or something, tiny, tiny little bit. But the thing is my heart breaks for these people, and because they've really been destroyed as a people, and they're just now kind of starting to get themselves organized to actually say we can get our traditions back. You know, we can know who we are, right, and who we were. And because when settlers came to North America, especially 1800s, 1700s it wasn't such a big deal, but 1800s, there was a real move, especially with the Catholic Church, um, and the government, Canada and USA, to get move these native peoples onto reservations and then rip their children out of their hands, make them go to residential schools, so that they had to learn English or French, whether you're in the U.S. or Canada. Up here, they had to learn probably both English and French, but back east, I think they had to learn French. Over here in the west side, they had to learn English. So the thing is like they just abuse these children horrifically, and all in the name of this is what we need to do. I don't know how you could do that to a child. I mean, I was abused. I don't know how my mom could have done what she did to me, or my dad, or my brother. But I'm talking, I don't know how these people who are wearing the robes in the Church of God, we're supposed to love with the love of Christ. I'm a Christian, so I know all about this stuff. And they're supposed to take care of people, not hurt people. How they can justify doing that stuff to children, I just can't fathom it. To me, they're not the church, even though they're claiming to be the church. No real Christian could ever do, no one ever, no real person in Christ Jesus could ever do that to another person. Mm-mm. Wouldn't be possible. Tells me they're not. They're not Christian. They're under the guise of Christians. So they're not real. It's not the real church. It's not the real body of Christ. There's no way that a person who in Christ could do that to another person. Mm-mm. Whether it's a child or an adult, this just wouldn't be possible. They'd rather lay their life down for that person than to hurt that person. That's just how it is. So there now, because those most of the schools closed. So we're going to look at more of this article. This is absolutely crazy what happened here. We did a show on this with AU4H Radio, Advocates United for Humanity, AU4H Radio on YouTube here, and it was Donna Shear, Lee Roberts, and myself, and we did a whole show on this issue with Every Child Matters at the time, because we actually know people uh, who are friends of ours who, excuse me, who are Native American. They're Métis, and they were part of this movement in Kamloops, and my heart was just broken for these people. I just, I mean, I knew all this stuff years ago that this was going on, because there were articles coming out through the years about this stuff, but this was the most recent one where they were closing this Kamloops residential school down. It was being used for some sort of government building or something. It was no longer a residential school. It was probably a library and whatever else. Well, they were going to tear it down, and in doing so, because it was old, it was an old building, obviously. In doing so, they found a mass grave. They were doing something on the property, and they found this mass grave of all these children, 215 children. And they looked back at the records, and the people running that Kamloops residential school had said that the children had run away. But what it is they just killed them and then threw them in a mass grave, right? Like, this is so pathetic. So all of these people's families were wondering where their little boy or their daughter was, living on the street somewhere, whether they were alive or dead. Had no idea that the actual school was responsible for killing them, and that their little bodies lied in that grave the whole time. My heart was just broken for these people. No one should ever have to deal with that. No one should ever have to go through that. I was abused as a child, so I know. But I'm just saying, institutional abuse. These people came from good homes. These children were ripped out of their families' homes. It's not like these children were abandoned and it's one of those orphanage type situations, which is really bad. But the thing is these children were ripped out of their parents' arms. Their parents were had to, if they wouldn't allow their children to go to these residential schools, they'd be arrested and they'd lose their children anyway. So they were forced to give up their children to these residential schools. They had no choice. And some of those little children would run away, but then they'd get caught and then they'd be severely abused, and that's probably where they'd be killed, because they'd just be beaten so badly they'd just die. That's what my grandmother did to one of her sons. This stuff just really goes on, whether we want to talk about it or not. It's happening, and you know, it's just it's just not okay. They're finding more and more bodies at these residential schools. They're going around now because of that issue. They're going around to all the known residential schools, and they're with the radar um, equipment to look for mass graves, and they're finding them. So they said more than 150,000 First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children attended residential schools, dating back to 1870. These institutions, created by Christian churches and the Canadian government, were designed to forcibly separate Indigenous children from their families and strip them of their cultural practices, languages, and ways of life. So these schools were also rampant with severe physical, emotional, sexual abuse, with a mortality rate between 40 and 60%. So over 130 residential schools were located across Canada, the last being closed in 1996. So the impact of residential schools still lives on today, with the effects of abuse felt throughout generations. I've watched videos and stuff. You can find videos here on YouTube of these people who are Métis or Inuit and talking about their growing up in those schools, because they're still alive today. There's many survivors who are still alive today and talk about what was done to them at those schools. It's heartbreaking. It's just as bad as listening to me talking about what was done to me. It's heartbreaking. It really is. And it's like all at the hands of somebody who was supposed to take care of them. And same with me. My parents were supposed to take care of me and love me and make sure nobody was going to sexually abuse me. Right. So we've got to care. All of us have to care. Get involved in your local area. Do what you can. Child abuse, the stigma surrounding it, nobody wants to talk about it because they're like, why would this person be talking about child abuse? That's really like, I mean, when I started speaking out about this stuff, I was just like, I don't care, because I'm not embarrassed. The shame is on the abuser, right? The shame goes to the abusers. And I thought I can talk about this stuff, no problem. I didn't like what I saw, when I was growing up and what I was forced to deal with. And so I don't mind speaking out on behalf of these little children today who are going to die because there's going to be no help for them. Because somebody will know about the abuse, but they won't make a phone call. Don't want to rock the boat. Don't, they're afraid of the abuser. So they just let the abuser kill the child or do whatever they're going to do. And all out of fear. It's like, you know, that's just not okay. It's just really not. And, these child sexual predators out here are going to get a hold of children because nobody's going to pay any attention to what's going on. So it's like, this is ongoing. And it's got no, it doesn't seem like it's going to be ending anytime soon. And that's why I keep talking. I said that a long time ago, back in 2009. I was like, I'm going to talk until I just can't talk anymore. When I'm on my deathbed, I won't be able to talk anymore, so I won't be talking about child abuse. But the issue is it's just my way of saying this is not okay. And like I said, I don't have time or money to get involved in the criminal justice system, or some sort of group that's working to change the laws and to change the situation for these children. So I just keep using my voice to promote education, and really to open people's eyes about how serious this really is. And there's a lot of us out here doing this. Thank God. Like I said, I just wanted to be one more voice. I was following after a whole lot of other people that I had seen, and I thought, hey, they're doing it. You know, they're out here shouting out that we need to stop, prevent child abuse. I can do that too. You know, and it's what's it gonna hurt me to spend a few hours here and there, you know, talking about these issues that we know are sadly real, but we can't do anything about tonight. So these children are going to die. It just breaks my heart. Um, you know, somebody should be taking care of those children, loving them, and doing the right thing by them, not hurting them, not beating on them, not sexually abusing them, not psychologically abusing them, not emotionally abusing them, just taking care of them, you know. And if they're struggling, get some help so that they don't hurt their child. you know, swallow your pride and get some help, you know, so that your child can have a better life, and you too are struggling and you're listening to this, you know. um, there's help for people. You don't have to abuse your child. So if you are listening to this and you are abusing your child or your children, you don't have to. You can get help. You can get your child some help too. And it's just so important. Oh man, you know, my heart just broke for these people. And I have watched a lot of the videos because I'm interested to hear what they have to say. And it's so heartbreaking. The survivors from these residential schools who actually survived and weren't killed, because they talk about some of their friends who were killed and they witnessed it, and there was nothing that they could do, you know. And that just breaks my heart. It's not like they could tell somebody. Who are you going to tell, you know? The other murderer that's murdering the other children? It's like they were at the hands of these people, at the mercy of these people who showed them no mercy. I'm a Christian, so I know all about it. You know, I've got a bachelor. I'm working on a bachelor of ministry right now, but it's just really a bachelor of biblical studies. So, and I study theology. I know a lot about the Bible. I know a lot about the Christian religion as it is, um, and it has nothing to do with what the Catholics are doing. Sorry. So, the cult religion. I'm sorry. I just have to say it. I really do. Um, because they have been responsible for hurting so many people for so many thousand, like 2,000 years, just about 2,000 years, almost 1,700 years. That's a long time, right? But they're not the only ones. Like I said, um, anybody in the church can be an abuser, and there's plenty of them in the other churches too. So whether it's, you know, evangelical, Baptist, they're all guilty of hurting children. They've been doing it for years, and even today, you know, they're still doing it. And especially in other countries where there's nobody really looking in. Now, the North America, it's a little bit harder today because there are people that are aware of this stuff. Around the world, you don't know, especially orphanages that are run by churches. You got to know that there's probably abuse going on there. We're talking Africa, Asia. There's nobody to protect those children, and so they're probably told, well, if you want to live, then you're going to do this. You know, as far as being used sexually, they're basically just sexual predators, just um, exploiting these children sexually, right? And it's like that's. I wish I had more time. I almost wish I had about 6 lifetimes and a whole lot of money and really good health, because I really have a lot of work to do to go around and bust these people. I think that'd be great. I'd love to go around and bust all these people doing this stuff, man. But me and my friend wanted to be in the in the military. We wanted to be in um, the military police. We also wanted to be police officers. Like I really wanted to be able to go around and bust really bad, evil people. Not people for speeding tickets and stuff like that. I had no interest in that. I wanted to get involved in bust bad people, like child sexual predators and child abusers. I was like, get them. You know what I mean? It's too bad it didn't happen, but oh well. You know, so you know, God gave me a voice. I can speak, and I can speak out against this stuff, and I don't mind. And nobody else should mind either. Like we seriously, all of our voices are important. We seriously all need to get involved and speak out against this stuff. Like absolutely. The shame is on those people who are remaining silent. That's where the shame lies, because they don't care and they're allowing it to go on. I'm not talking about you just because you don't talk about child abuse. I'm talking about those who know a child's being abused and sit there and say nothing and do nothing. They're just as guilty as the person doing it. They're just as guilty because they knew and they know and they don't get that child any help. Right. So it's really sad is what it is. So if you know a child's being abused, you got to do the right thing and get that child some help, right? So it's this article. It just that's about it. That's about all they had to say. But there was a lot of information at the time when it actually was happening, where they had located this mass grave, and Um, so if you look out there and you just type in Every Child Matters movement or whatever, you can find all kinds of information about that. And I know it was going on in the States too. It was. It's good wherever the Catholic Church really was, um, because they're probably still doing it today. I wouldn't doubt it. That's just what they love to do: beat children, sexually abuse them, men and women both. Doesn't seem to matter. Um, they're all involved in it, right? And I mean, not all of them. Like I'm sure there's good, for sure. That they're not all guilty of this. It's just that they what are they going to do? They're probably, even if they tried to get the other person to stop doing what they were doing, their lives are probably threatened, because there's probably 10, 15 of these predators that probably say, well, we'll take you out if you say something, you know because I think there's more predators than good people in those places. Absolutely. That's why it was hard for them to, like, if there's always got to be somebody who's half decent or who's good in a situation too. They just can't say anything. And it's the same with children being abused. Many times the person who the abuser is, the other person is their life is being threatened as well. That I can kind of understand why they don't say anything, because they can't even get out to say anything. They're probably being held against their will. You know what I mean? So I'm not talking about that kind of stuff. I'm talking about a grandparent or an aunt or uncle who knows there's something awful going on, and they just don't do anything about it because they don't want to rock the boat. You know, the good Lord, should they ever have to be responsible to help that child? You know what I mean? Their little niece or nephew or their grandchild. Uh, put a damper on the pocketbook. They wouldn't want that. You know what I mean? It's just really pathetic that people don't care about children. Children are just little tiny adults, is what they are. People don't seem to mind standing up for adults, but they don't care about children. And all children are is little tiny adults. All we are is big, grown up little children. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of pathetic the way that people feel about children, that they're expendable, that they don't matter. It doesn't seem to matter if you kill them or not, whatever. I'm tired of it. And that's why I speak out against child abuse and stand up for child rights. 'Cause I'm sick and tired of people thinking that it's perfectly okay to kill a child. It's really not. It's what you call murder. And even if you get away with it on the earth, not going to get away with it in eternity. No. There'll be a judgment day, and I'm happy. Judgment day is coming. Oh, it's going to be wonderful. We're going to be laughing, and all those people are going to be shocked as they go down to the pits of hell. Hallelujah. So that's what I have to say about the subject. I'm really, institutional abuse pisses me off because these children are the most vulnerable. We're talking orphans, we're talking children who have been ripped from their parents' arms. It's still going on today, and thrown into some sort of foster care situation, or, um, you know, some sort of orphanage, or some sort of, state run situation, government run thing. You know, these children are completely vulnerable. There's nobody to protect them, and they don't have a family unit around them anymore. Not even, like I said, an aunt or an uncle who could possibly check up on them and make sure they're all right. So people that abuse these vulnerable children, I mean, shame on them, shame, shame. And you know, we as a society, as a group of people on the planet, need to care enough about this to speak out against it. Because by not saying anything, it's kind of like saying, "Well, it doesn't really matter to me," so that means you actually agree with it. To see something and to not say anything is to be just as guilty, basically, of doing it. You know, we have to speak out against this stuff. We have to change this for the children of tomorrow, right? Oh, so important. So let's see, tomorrow night, what I'm talking about. Let's see, I'll be back on 8 o'clock. Hopefully, not as grumpy as I am tonight. This subject actually sits really close to my heart because I'm right up here with these Native Americans, and I see them. I would, they just live in my community, and I see them, and my heart. I know those residential schools were in Calgary too, surrounding area where I live. My heart just breaks for these people. You know. Tomorrow night we're talking about SBS shaken baby syndrome. That's a big issue, and I really would like to talk about that because years ago I had done some looking into it, talking about it, And there's lots of good information out there about it, but a lot of people don't realize that shaking a baby, is just a bad idea, right? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about that tomorrow night in ways that parents can get help, to not shake their baby with, and so their child ends up with this SBS, shaken baby syndrome, right? So important. So that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow night, same time, 8 o'clock p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I wish you a good night. Take care, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. I figure, well, I've only got so much time left on the planet. I don't know how long I have. Nobody does, right? And I've had some health sort of issues going on. So I'm kind of like, I'm not going to be surprised if something's not right. So it's kind of like I'm getting up there and I don't know how long I'll be here. And I wanted to continue to talk about this stuff, make as much noise as possible, as long as I could. And I have a lot of people who work, follow my stuff, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, because I know that means that you actually care, and you know that just makes my heart happy. Right? So have a great night, everybody. Talk to you tomorrow night.